Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. Hopefully my voice is loud and clear. I would like to begin by sharing this quote from Lao Tzu, where he says, "I have just 3 things to teach: simplicity, patience, compassion. These 3 are your greatest treasures." And so, especially for this episode, if there's any miscellaneous, outside noises or pauses or coughs, practice patience wherever you are. Honor Lao Tzu. So the inspiration for tonight's episode was a sort of realization I've had on what I call the inner realms and the outer realms. And I noticed something. It's as if the species, think of it this way, imagine you are an animal photographer. And you have been waiting for this, let's say, mountain lion to, you have been waiting on this snowy mountain for this mountain lion to step out of its cave or whatever. And so that moment when the mountain lion steps out of the cave, the nature photographer is literally as the stillness, as part of the environment, observing it. Okay, so maybe this is better. Somebody just let me know in the chat section that the voice isn't loud. So if this doesn't work, if this isn't better, then in some sense, there's an issue. The way I perceive anything really is that whatever a person does, the moment goes forth. And wisdom commands, ancient wisdom commands that we become detached, because that is the nature. Before we can accept the world, it has changed. Before we could believe in truth, the truth seeker changes, the believer changes every day it wakes up. But anyways, back to the mountain lion metaphor. So I've made some notes, and I'm gonna make more notes with the notepad. If you're new listening to this, I tend to give these talks like a painter. I am actually painting a sort of vision behind these episodes. But anyways, so I've written something here. I've written the less. Okay, so let me explain the title. let me say, why should the future generations trust the world? So here's the way I'll just get into it. I see a human being pretty much. And the human being is like, I would say, can be divided into the inner realms, or here, can be considered to have a dimension of mind and can be considered to have a dimension of body. As someone who's using the term inner realms for the sake of these Mr.Within talks, I'm using it in a way where intentionally I'm using it in a way where nobody has used it before. And what I'm trying to say is that in front of our eyes, we have the outer realms. And just for the sake of, giving a sort of inner dimension, we can say that we have the inner realms. And the inner realms is what is behind your eyes. Your eyes. So, all of this suggests the human being has an inner life. The relationship between one's inner life, one's inner and outer life suggests how much they trust the world. Now I'll open a new page. And so, let's say if there was a scenario where the future generations didn't trust the world, what would it look like? And then another question arises: what would the outcome or destiny? I don't know how many people know this, but the word tiny is in destiny. Destiny of the microcosmically, the macrocosmically tiny. But anyways, what would the outcome, destiny of such a scenario be? This is the point of this episode. I feel I have envisioned this. So there is a component to the title where it's the future generations. Now, for this one, the future generations. So pretty much this is the idea, okay? The scenario that the future generations don't trust the world. Is it, I guess this would divide into, is it dangerous? Is it human? These would be the two questions that would arise. So, pretty much a dangerous scenario. Why should a person on this planet say that the future generations, if they don't trust the world, why that could be dangerous? I guess in the previous notes, I'll go back to the previous notes for a second. Or here, the future generations. Pretty much, it's again the human being with the inner realms. Here, IR. So if there is an inner realms and an outer realms, then for the inner realms and the outer realms, there comes, in some sense, a sense of self and a sense of world. And we have a sense of self and a sense of world. So what I was saying earlier, that really what the human being is it appears as just one physical creature in a physical world, but how we know we are being physical is actually being non-physically done. When a human being says who they are, in some sense it is in some sense like what free will has the mask of a subject on its face, you know. So it's another way of saying this would be inner self, outer self. Excuse me. So when I say the future generations must not distrust the world, because I'm saying that the human being constitutes of a mind and body, in an inner life and an outer life. The inner life is like there's an inner self to that and an inner world, and to the outer life there's an outer self and an outer world. Our outer self is how we're all being a biological organism and member of the human species. Our outer world is our outer self is how we're being a member of the species. Our outer world is just the cosmos, the galaxies and stars and the edgeless space we find. And I would say when it comes to the inner self is the subject. So if somebody thinks they're a good person, that's an inner self. Your inner self feels a good person. It's another way of saying where without minds, duality cannot be considered. The mind is actually a dualistic invention due to cosmological circumstances, and at the same time, personal. Like, I don't know how to tell you, but it's as if like evolution is being outlined by, it's like the microcosm's outline is the macrocosm. Free will is like considering that in the outer realms, like who the person is bound to the forces of nature, the universal laws and whatnot, the forces we find in the outer realms, but the free will is an inner force that can change the human being. Right? It's as if we are creatures on this planet where our inner lives have activated. And due to our inner life activating, our outer life has become sophisticated in such a way that we don't see penguins building skyscrapers, It's like, or we don't see penguins opening up nightclubs, or lions, or wolves working in Wall Street, These are developments that arose when we realized there was another dimension where the human being could be, and at least a sort of little force. You know what it is? It's as if like really nature is moving itself. Okay, if we were to consider all that is present in nature, right? Nature is moving itself, and we are like on the shoulder of a giant. But at the same time, because we're on the shoulder of the giant, the consequences of it's as if we are a small force, part of a giant event, right? It's as if there's this giant thing called existence, right? And human beings have appeared, and pretty much the greatest puzzle in existence, or the greatest puzzle of existence, I would say, is actually how it's pretty much like how it's as if how you get 8 billion 8 billion creatures that each are starting out from their inner realms, and in some sense, how do you get these 8 billion creatures to stranded on a galactic rock in the middle of nowhere? How do you get 8 billion? like it's separate universes to start actually organizing. It's pretty much, I'm seeing every person's DNA as a unique instrument, or every person can be considered as a sort of musician of what they are, right? Like a person, maybe it's, you know what it is, it's kind of like, just like how a person holds an instrument and plays it, it's as if the world is holding the individual, and in some sense their life's work becomes how great they play this their life, their moment, you know. So I guess where I'm going with this is that aside from acknowledging the dimensions the human being finds itself, the human being can either, let's say the human being is starting out from an inner life, and then first it's the outer life, but there isn't consciousness of individualism, and when there's consciousness of individualism, for example, when the child can notice its reflection in the mirror, and in some sense it's like from there on a sort of dualistic duality begins sculpting the individual. And so the inner life begins, right? So first the child has an outer life, then when the child grows up and becomes more intelligent, the inner life is activated, right? The more the person is alive on this planet, actually their inner life, you start living more. It's, you know what it is, it's like from the beginning of life to its end, I don't want to say purpose, but it seems to what fits the design of why human beings are on a sort of roller coaster ride of karma, you know, in samsara. What explains the rise and fall of, let's say, experience? It's as if the world is designed in a way where we end up, like the mind is, imagine, here I'll draw it. So imagine we have first the body, and then in some sense we have the mind. The mind is inside the body. The mind is smaller than the body. Now imagine we have, you know, midway through life, it becomes something like this. Like the circles are over one another, where it becomes body and mind are becoming the same moment. Mind, body, body, mind. And then as the person, let's say, is getting close to the transition point from this realm, it becomes something where it becomes like this, you know, where the body, where the mind, where awareness, where attention is rooted in awareness, of an intelligent awareness more than it is in the body. So this is the transition in the life, starting from 0 to, let's say, 100 plus. We go through these, you know. So pretty much it's kind of like we have body, the body is like this, and then the mind, I mean technically the body, here, I'll draw it perfectly. we have the body being a bell curve, and we have the mind being like this. Okay. This is the body, this is the mind. We put the dimension of time here, this becomes 100. And I would say there's time, and then there's space, which consciously becomes, this would be through time and this one would be experience. So the experience of the biological body at some point ends, you know, and the mind keeps going, and let's say I draw a layer of the mind to here, and we have the body is honestly like a bell curve. So technically, regardless of how liberated a person becomes, the experience of how existence is like a candle, and our minds, our consciousness is like the flame and the glow of the candle. You know, I would use the terms like this, where I would say the body of the candle, the wax of the candle is the body, the wick of the candle is the brain, the flickering flame of the candle is in some sense what the brain is projecting, which is mind, and then what the glow of the candle is how the mind is interacting with all the space that there exists for it to experience. So what it is that nature has had a very bizarre system where if a person chooses to make it positive, negative, then they'll be like, what's the point of this universe? You know, what's the point of there being such a vast and big universe, but human beings just live for it, creatures just live for a little time? Like, it, on some level, it's kind of cruel. You show a creature a giant world, but it can only be a small part of it, right? This is why, in some sense, at least for Buddha, it was like contentment was a treasure. You know, for Lao Tzu, he was saying patience, right? Because it's so bizarre that if we give a storyline to how everything is happening at once, it will always be wrong, right? Because there's so many dimensions. There's uncharted territory. It's like the species has had at least the humility to be like there's an unobservable universe. It's as if, like, you know, the astronomer was like, what am I looking at? And it was like, it was a black hole in space. Like, this whole time we thought all of space was black, you know, but there's a black hole in the blackness of space, do you see? Like, reality is hilarious. It's as if this whole time, it's like the species has been inside a black hole. It's as if we're like, where is the, you know, darkness coming from? It's like, what is space? The pitch blackness of space is like how light can't enter a black hole. You know, I think right now I am way more inclined to considering we're experiencing life inside a black hole, and the most bizarre thing is that if that black hole is self-conscious, but itself would be all of it. You know, it's as if I guess in a mystical sense, it would be like, are we the imagination of God? Or not? Are we the imagination of God, or is God our imagination? And the word imagination, of course, is outdated. The word inner realms is so much more better to use. People don't realize this idea of the inner realms and outer realms. It solves all psychological problems and mental illness. At least perception-based, inner perception-oriented. It's as if when a person can discriminate what is happening in the outer realms, which is a suggestion of what is really happening, and then, in some sense, what is happening in the inner realms, which is what is semi-happening, right? It's like from an Aristotelian view, I would say the outer realms is 4 out of 4 dimensions real. I would say in the inner realms, it's 3 out of 4 dimensions real, causally. But the only issue with the inner realms is that we can't touch what we imagine. In the outer realms, a person can hold a can, but in the inner realms, if I wanted to hold a can, I'd have to envision myself holding a can, which is technically there are no hands. It's like in the presence of the spotlight of attention. The emergence of an actor is sort of how the brain is copy-pasting what it's seeing in front of our eyes, and then when it copy-pastes it from in front of our eyes, the only way it makes sense of it is by relating it to its content. That means imagine like the brain is a jar, and every experience we have becomes a memory, and imagine this memory is like a coin or whatever, like something like a button or something we put into this thing, into this jar. So it's as if our brain contains all the memories that have entered that have been recorded in consciousness. At the same time, the projector hasn't stopped. The camera hasn't stopped. And so it's as if like present information is knowing the future information based on how the past defines the present. Right? To me, in the New Age community, they say come to the here and now, be here in the here and now, and just be present. But it's hilarious. The only way the person can consider a present is because they've had a past. So technically, all those people in the here and now, they're actually being in the past of the world. That means what appears as here and now to, let's say, the eyes of the human being is actually, the past's artwork. The renunciation that we find spoken about in yoga and ancient mysticism, it's a renunciation, it's a sort of detachment from the desire of what you find, and desires based on the past. That means any person's motivation is obviously based on the information that they have received and how they have become the information. There's some people who go through a tough experience and they just get up and, brush off the dust from their shoulders, right? And there's some people who go through an intense experience and they get redefined by it. Usually physical trauma is like this. But I would say it's psychological trauma. Its resolution is that the person has to realize they are the pilot of their consciousness. Let's look at the concept of trust. So a person can have trust in, again, the same model applies, or they either have, let's say, trust in their inner world and their outer world. If a person doesn't have trust in their inner world and outer world, in the outer world, it's as if the person doesn't trust existing technically. And in the inner world, I would say when a person doesn't trust their inner world, it's as if they are treating in their mind as baseless, right? When I say baseless, it's as if the foundation of intelligence should be a singular point. That means me being a being here talking about the in realms and outer realms. Well, the commonality of both of them is that they're all in space. I'm like that human being who suddenly realized that in all the games that matter plays, space is the common denominator. The ultimate renunciation seems to be a realization that space cannot die. It is ever present. It is omniscient. So technically, if space was alive, right, it's another way of saying God is watching everything. The idea of God, I would say that some people believe in God. I would say for me, the concept of God is beyond language, actually. That means when I've had moments in this life where I've been in like a dangerous scenario and all I could do was just pretty much just stop all that my ego and free will was doing, and for a second it was like the ego backed down and my heart started calling to, I would say, that the universe is watching over me. It's like a prayer to an inconceivable source. It's as if the source of all, imagine like you're standing in a room and suddenly the inconceivable source of being is also standing in that room. But when I say standing, not in shape, but in being, in presence. The personality of the human being is a known construct, but the presence of the human being is the pure awareness of the mind. That is an unknown. It's just unknown. That means any spiritual person who's truly honest, it's like after the recognition that a person can paint any story on this in the middle of the void. The void is like an empty piece of paper. Every person, their meaning of life, their beliefs, their philosophies, what is it they're painting, right? Technically, philosophers are like painters with language. They're painting with language. So, let me see. I mean, I guess this is the pattern I see it. Let's say we have 2022. And then we have 1022. And we have 3022. Or I got something better. Imagine we have 2002, 2022, and we have 2222, which I would say technically would be one of the most divine years ever in human time. Imagine writing a book and, somebody's like, hey man, when did you publish your book? And you're like, buddy, 2222. We have the future, we have the present, and we have the past. So if I wanted to bring in a consideration of, let me say, trust, the idea of trust, I would say in 2002, there was a trust in natural self. And there was a trust in natural world. That means we, like in 2002, whoever was alive then, I was alive. at that time. In 2002, I would say it's as if like human beings were not afraid of a sort of, cyber world domination going on. It's as if the early internet had a purity to it. In 2022, I would say people are reaching a point where, my God, there we go. So, in the past, we trusted that we were naturally being a body, and there was a natural world, children still climb trees. I would say in 2022, what the trend is going onwards to the future seems to me that people are distrusting, people still trust in the natural self, people still want to be natural beings, right? So there's technically, I would say, trust in natural self, and there is a distrust in the world. Now this is dangerous, right? This is what I would say one of the most dangerous and one of the biggest challenges that could lead a species towards what I call inner extinction. You see that these two terms I use, inner extinction and outer extinction, I've talked about in other talks. But pretty much the idea of inner extinction is when the idea of the human being, when the human being can no longer be a biologically natural being, right? It's as if we're this creature that was just living in nature, in the jungles. Then we created the concrete jungle. Then we started to behave in accordance to our free will. And the free will, by the nature of being a separate self, is disconnected from the ecosystem. We're that creature in the world that in some sense, from a natural world, you know what it is? It's kind of like from a natural world, inside a natural world, we built an unnatural world. We lived in that unnatural world to the point that we started to believe that our natural self is better off unnatural, right? So the biggest danger is that I see it on a psychological level. Physiological levels, give it 400 years. In 400 years, that's when outer extinction, when I say outer extinction, I don't mean like a natural disaster. It's like the human being can just choose to be a robot. I mean, technically that would be inner extinction, an inner outer extinction. But it's pretty much natural body, natural mind. Natural self in a natural world. A civilization, it's not that I'm saying it's completely unnatural. Civilization 1.0 is not the same as nature. You see, it's as if we built a world where it's being governed by time. But when you look at all the creatures in nature, they're not wearing watches. You know, it's like animals, they care about their future if they're being attacked, but if they're not being attacked, it's as if they're abiding by the program of their instincts. It's like instinctually we're a timeless phenomena, but you know, I would say beyond the instincts in the domains of how real events begin leveling towards the abstract. Pretty much the more civilization they participate in the world, and because it's as if somebody who distrusts an environment, they are not their true self. Now imagine if the civilization was something that a person couldn't trust, right? I mean, right now, of course, there's massive stuff happening on the planet, but humanity has governed itself in accordance to laws. Right? It's as if laws are what is keeping us civilized as creatures. Pretty much think of it this way. The less people can trust being themselves, or I should say it this way, it's like in the future, people are, rather than stepping out of their inner realms, kind of finding a synchronization of the inner and the outer realms, like two wings of a bird that should fly at the same time. It's as if, imagine the outer realms is the right wing of the bird, and if the bird doesn't trust its right wing, its left wing and right wing won't be synchronized and it can't fly. So the future and pretty much if human beings are born in a system and they distrust the system, right? That distrust will cause them to rely on their inner realms. You see, what that means is that it's as if the more unnecessarily, inefficiently dishonest civilization is, or inconsiderate to life sensitivity civilization is, it's as if more people are just going to go back into their inner realms, and then people are going to glorify where their attention is, right? You know, it's as if sometimes people believe in ideas because they're like, I gotta believe it's something, you know? But in reality, to me, the most enlightened people are people who realize the unknown when he was here first. Anybody who distrusts where they are, they're willing to abandon ship, and they're willing to, you know, think of it this way. If people, imagine, this is a hilarious hypothetical sci-fi scenario that I just came to me right now, but imagine in the future, we had the human species had the strangest alien encounter, or imagine this is in a parallel universe of Earth, where these aliens arrived, and these aliens did not, the only thing they communicated to the human species, this alien species that arrived, was that whoever litters, or if your species doesn't care for your planet, we will invade. How bizarre is that setting, right? Imagine. I write sci-fi, so I think of these scenarios often, you know, or when they arise to me. But I would say, like, imagine that feeling that if you litter, you will not exist. You know what I'm trying to say? I'm trying to say that we're all alive once, and the puzzle is how do we get the most advanced, best case scenario for the human species to occur? Or how do we even notice what it is? Sometimes when a person can't solve a problem, it's as if that means there's an earlier problem they need to solve. Right? That means they haven't looked at something. Anybody who can't solve a problem, it's like you haven't looked at something before that problem. That means the definition of the problem is incomplete. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that right now we're still having a natural biological body, and the human being is still its natural self. It's just that technology overloads us with information, and so in the inner realms there's too many options of variations of selfhood simulation of the brain. So in some sense the human being finds itself confused in a world that in a strange way is happening so simply. Truth is simple in ways that complexity cannot allow. The duality of complexity does not allow. If human beings distrust the world, the danger of this is that they will ignore the world and they will rely on their inner life. And it's another way of saying shy people and introverts are the first victims of human beings becoming machines over a time span of 1,000 years. These are things that sometimes I feel like some stuff, like what human history is not just what happened, but strangely to give it meaning, it is what had to happen. It's as if we are consciousness that has opened its eyes in the middle of a film that has been going on for as long as time can be considered, to have originated. It's like somebody says, how old are you? You give an answer. The answer is based on time. You say 30. And now imagine somebody says, how old is time? How old is the concept of time? And let's say we take it back to, the Mayans, who were had a sophisticated calendar, but at the same time, we're doing psychotic level of human sacrifices, right? Like people look at the Mayan calendars like, oh, look at that, it's a face in there, but they don't realize the savageness and brutality of our ancestors, right? It's hilarious. They say honor your ancestors, but the more you go back in the lineage, the more savage of an entity it's hilarious. Even like there was a time where we didn't even know we can be. Now we're being it so easy. If the future generations distrust their outer realms, they will inevitably have no choice but to trust their inner world. Now, if they trust their inner world, the brain builds itself in accordance to what its attention is on throughout the day. So if a person is I'll use myself as an example. I have wondered, what has it done to my psychology, giving these talks for 10 years, and pretty much what I do is I've discovered a state where I can trust the world moment enough for it to happen. The danger of distrusting the outer world is inner extinction. If a person doesn't trust, if a dancer doesn't trust the stage, the dancer cannot dance. If a human being doesn't trust their body, they can't move, right? It's like we trust our body on a second nature level, right? It's as if nobody thinks about, they're walking. Nobody thinks about, am I walking in the right way? No. Right? Maybe people in the fashion industry care about how they walk, but I'm saying, in reality, some things have gone into an automated second nature to human psychology, and what lies in consciousness, or you can say consciousness is deciding what is received by the inner unconscious. You know, Carl Jung spoke about a collective unconscious. Mr.Within is speaking about a sort of inner and outer unconscious. Right now, technically, by the definition of being unconscious, it's contentless. Anything that is contentless is philosophically on the level of considering the meaning of space. So here, I'll say it this way. If I want to move my body, I gotta trust the ground. I gotta trust the world, like the world it's in. And if I want to speak, I have to have some level of trust in how I am a subject in a world that is also being considered as a subject. It's like in front of our eyes, object to object relationship first. You know, for the mind, it's like subject to subject relationship, and consciousness is literally where the you can see is arising, where the unknown and the known are meeting. We are the intersection of two dimensions, which makes me feel there is another earth. There is an invisible earth overlaid upon this visible earth. It's like that's the only way the yin-yang circle can have great meaning. You know? That in the visible, like in the visible universe, there's a part of that visible universe which is the invisible. Guys, this explains the Big Bang. Sorry, not the Big Bang. This explains black holes. Black holes are they are revolving doors. Let me explain this. Black holes excuse my language. Black doors. Excuse this speech. What I'm trying to say is that here, I'll draw it here. We have the yin-yang symbol. Right? And so we have a bit of the yin and the yang, and a bit of the yang and the yin. Now, if we wanted to say, hey, let's make the yang side of the yin-yang symbol, right, in some sense, the observable universe, and let us make the yin sign of the yin-yang symbol and the unobservable universe. So it would be saying that in a visible world, there is an invisible self, and in an invisible world, there is a visible self. Okay? And so the totality of this, it's as if we are there's two earths, guys. There's an invisible earth too. There's an unobservable earth in the outer realms. I'm not saying in the inner realms. In the outer realms, it's probably in a dimension we can't see, where it could be as bizarre as the planet having chakras. You know, it's like the yogis, like you know, imagine somebody, you know, sitting somewhere where they're feeling energetic, and they're like, man, is this the crown chakra of the planet I'm standing on? Like, I would say in 2022, in the future, these are the pathways. So this takes us to a sort of, let's say, crossroad. Okay. So one possibility, I would say, is that distrust in natural self. this is another way of saying, like, pretty much people don't trust themselves to be a natural event anymore, and they don't trust the world being a natural event. Children in the future generations that could potentially get lost in cyberspace. The other scenario would be that we turn things around and it's trust in our natural self, trust in unnatural. Pretty much, guys, I'm making it complex, but I'm trying to say that if we were to visualize it like a film, let's say we're like a film director and we want to create a scene to wonder about what's going to happen to a species when it distrusts the worlds it's in. If we distrust the outer realms, we will rely on our inner realms. If we distrust our inner realms, we may rely on the outer realms, or we may reach a point where effort is being questioned. Right? The nature of reality is that it goes forward. The nature is that we are energy, and this energy, the free will, it gives it direction. You know, energy is like, speed, and consciousness is like velocity. Free will is here to direct, to pilot. Pretty much it's like the brain is like, our consciousness is like a telescope, and we choose how we, set the gauge. I keep thinking, sorry guys, it was interruption. I guess I'll say this. It's like they're gonna stop being themselves in the outer realms, then people are gonna rely on their inner realms, then they're gonna slowly find there being less and less a purpose to be a biological entity. I was thinking of trying to solve the obesity crisis in America, and I was thinking how can we solve it? And then I thought, what if the hallways of schools were turned into some sort of obstacle course, physical obstacle course, right? Kind of like those shows you see where they're jumping on these pads to get to the end of the obstacle course. And imagine children would just enter the front gates of the school, run through this obstacle course, and then energetically enter class as if they've, Or I thought about schools being built by stairs. When I was I lived in Iran for some years during middle school, and the school I was in had so many stairs, guys. It was literally like, you know, it's like that school, the destiny of all those people who attended that school with stairs is that it didn't matter if they skipped leg day, you know. You know. In the future, pretty much, attention's boundaries are based on trust. It's like, imagine two people are talking, they trust each other, then the moment they suddenly distrust each other, the inner realms of each person step out from the outer realms. That's a good way of saying it, that when people talk, their inner realms step out in the outer realms, and then the moment they distrust the outer realms, they in some sense cloak their mind. You know, it's like invisibility cloaks exist for speech. They're called silence. You know? Silence can be an invisibility cloak for the true inner realm of the individual. Silence and stillness, guys. This is so many mystical traditions have talked about this, that it's like one of the ways that a person finds liberation. They actually observe how they're being their moment. Freedom is instantaneous. So let me write something here, at least 2022, 222. I think it's going to be an incredible year. I think that all the problems the species has in 2022, in the next, give it 100 to 200 years, such incredible geniuses, such advanced communicators and pilots of consciousness will enter this earth. You know, it's as if Mr. Within is not alone. The destiny of the species is based on the might it releases now. It's as if the great performance has begun, and any consciousness in existence is a part of it. You know, and to try to wonder about how can a species orchestrate itself in the most efficient way when there are countless galaxies and stars, and human beings suffer based on, you know, linguistic lies. Like, it's remarkable how they're suffering at all in such a mysterious place. What we know, we realize, like, it passes, it goes on. I can tell you that, you know, I have said goodbye, not to just certain people who I knew, like I was never going to see that person in this lifetime again, you know, but I've also had moments where I have said goodbye, or I have just remained silent when an idea has entered my mind and I couldn't find a piece of paper or a pen or my phone or anything to write it down. It's like moments where you're just basking, you know, in, you know, inside, basking in the observance of an inner event. The mind is honestly an incredible technology. And what we know about technology, at least for now in human history, is that technologies have users. So for the future generations, they should begin treating everything as a technology, and then wondering about the role of the user of the technology and the technology itself. Right now, we're living on a planet where the technology is incredibly, like, accelerating, like exponentially growing towards the technological singularity that Ray Kurzweil speaks about. But the users of technology are like forgetting the periodic table in mathematics in schools, right? It's like children, or I should say it seems that people have decided more on an emotional route. You know, it's as if emotions are, to listen to an emotion is like I mean, really, how does a person reason anything, right? A person can be incredibly reasonable, then they get angry and they make an unreasonable decision. It's like, what happened to the reason, right? It's as if like an emotion became a justification for behavior, or there was a sort of calculation of the mind. And that requires patience. That means the patient people on the planet see the most. A patient person gets to actually see a lot. When I think about it, in all the moments I've been patient, I got to see how the moment happened before I happened in the moment. You know? Patience is kind of like the third eye of your mind, you know? Anyways, guys, I guess this episode is reaching fruition. The future generations must not distrust the world. If they do, they will not be... Here, I've written something, I should read this. The less you trust the outer realms, the less you feel confident the less you feel confident to express in the outer realms. So when a person can't trust who they will be in the outer realms, their trust can only be in their inner realms. And so I would say these Mr. Within talks are happening at a time where a species is subconsciously transitioning out of an acceptance of the long journey of nature, and emotions are making the human being want and it's as if, you know, it's like we don't want, just like a person, let's say somebody wants coffee, they go make instant coffee, like the shortest time we could make coffee. Now imagine somebody emotionally wants an instant paradise, right? It's as if like we have to consider that we are part of the great movement of a species in the cosmos. That is the most grounding idea. That means honestly, sky cities are the most grounding idea, you know. Children in sky cities in the future are going to look down at Earth and imagine you're a child born on a sky city and you've never been to the Earth. The greatest puzzle in existence is how do we get 8 billion inner realms to function in a way in one physical outer realm. So 8 billion, let's say, subjective, unknown inner realms. How do we get them to function in a singular outer realm, which is like a multiplayer online map, but instead of it being made of pixels, it's made of the periodic table. Sorry, earlier when I was talking about children forgetting, I think I said periodic table, I meant the multiplication table. But anyways, you know, through the imperfections of mankind, through what we've been, what we are, and what we can be, you know, it's as if we are perfectly being imperfect. So there's technically perfection into anything. You know, the moment there's imperfection, perfection exists. The moment there's perfection, imperfection exists. You see, the nature of the mind is so dualistic, it's ridiculous. It's like the metaphor they used for the brain being a sort of hamster on a wheel was accurate. You know, but it's the hamster on an endlessly spinning wheel of the brain's self-simulation until it realizes that if it wants to access a truth greater than its body, it must trust the world, and the world must become its body. When the world becomes the body, it's another way of saying a person has become pure awareness. And so samsara is on a screen, and that which is watching the screen is not in samsara. So that's how the instant freedom, like instant coffee, you know, it happens. The idea is that an advanced civilization will be like, okay, how random that 8 billion creatures can speak, communicate, have enough of memory and imagination, to be able to not just change alongside the world, but change how the change is changing. How the world is changing, we can direct it. We can give it a direction, right? It's like, what are we being attracted to as a species? It's like inner realm probability and outer realm actualization. It's as if our minds are here, not that we just sit in a sort of invisible chair of the whole moment being just the whole moment as a viewer, but in some sense the great performance of the lifetime being done. It's as if you live with the world in a way where it's all the world's life. It's as if that's really what it is. It's not human beings that are alive. It is a planet that is noticing itself. Human beings are the mirrors of the gods, Consciousness is a mirror. And it's reflecting an unknown. The source of the reflection of what becomes the content of the mind is unknown. It's as if the brain takes in light, and that light, imagine hilariously like a light beam going right through the eyes, and the brain being a sort of hall of mirrors, and the light just ching 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 ching. It's all the mirrors in some sense. The past, the present, the future of the present. I don't know how to say it, but it's as if when the world goes forth, all dimensions are pulled by it. There is the presence of just. It's like life is alive. The world is alive, and if the world was alive, how would we behave? It's as if because we are alive ourselves as human beings, it's as if the life that we see behind our eyes, we see its greatness not just in ourselves, but in the world that ourself is in. It's as if a person can be victorious, but to be victorious in a defeated world is just, an illusion. Unless we can build an advanced civilization, we will not know the true advanced human being. The advanced humanity is the destiny of how objects became subjects, and subjects realized they were moving within an unknown awareness. They were moved by the unknown. It's as if it's as Papaji says, what is the purpose of life? To return home, or something like that. The true home of the true being home, being true before it can deny itself. You see, it's like that's the elegance of the simple dimensions of life. The simpler they get, they eventually reach a point where they're too simple to doubt. And so there will come a moment where a person could be sitting down in nature, and for the first time their mind releases them from samsara. And when the mind releases them from samsara, they will realize the mind's presence. The mind is alive. And as you listen to the source of your inner, the cause of your inner life, the effects of the outer life become reorganized. It's as if like a hero did something great. Now what kind of karma would that hero have? in the relevance, in what would be relevant to that greatness, the hero. It's as if we are what we are how far we go. That is the greatness of mankind. That means right now every person's brain has probably, like how the mind works, is that in the subconscious or in the unconscious or in the unobservable universe behind our eyes, in the unobservable part of the universe behind our eyes, it's like subconsciously the brain has already fathomed its greatest outcome and its worst outcome. It's just that based on the type of ego a person has, they become a sort of filter for consciousness. So it's as if everybody has all their memories actually all the time, because the memories are imprints. It's like a sculptor sculpting something and the imprint stays. So everybody has, in some sense, I would say they have all their memories. It's just that how their consciousness identifies as being, how the attention is in the room suggests what room you're in. Memories don't belong to anyone. Ideas actually, if we were truly honest as beings, don't belong to anyone. Nobody can own a symbol, and it's like a changing world's owner is not. It's like the owner of a changing world is not in a changing world. What is moving anything at all? That is divinity. The future generations are gonna be too smart to distrust. Pretty much, I feel the smartest people in the future, they will realize that through the wave of benevolence, the most advanced civilization arises. Because if an advanced civilization can't be benevolent, here's the idea. It's like, if an advanced civilization can't be benevolent, it's not advanced. But if an advanced civilization is benevolent, it was forever advanced. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like not just how we walk in the world, but how our mind holds it all. Our attention is the greatest proof of divinity, which is a word of the word divinity is an ambassador of the inconceivably unknown. $8 billion human beings, if we could just see, like, imagine people trusted their outer realms, people trusted their inner realms. Do you know how many great ideas would overflow the civilization? It's like the more, it's not that, it's as if, like, how can we build a civilization where not only is existence in it fun, not only is existence in it honorable, but what if the existence is fascinating? That means an advanced civilization is a civilization where the beings are fascinated by the potential of where everything can go. That fascination, it's like the greatest leaders are fascinated by bigger worlds. This is something they don't say about leadership, but those people who are great leaders, they are actually, it's like, imagine a team member of a higher dimension is like the leader of a lesser dimension. But technically, in a higher dimension, it is not a leader. When it comes to human beings and any sort of transcendental activity, they begin to realize that on Earth, we are we're active, like we're the closest thing to, let's say divinity incarnata, or let's say divinity I don't know how to say it. It's like on Earth we are advanced beings, but in higher dimensions we are, I don't want to say we're just like, you know, in greater dimensions there is no language, there is no object-subject duality, there is just instantaneous knowing through being. So right now we have to do things to maintain our state of being, right? As an existential creature surviving. At least the way I have accessed it, I find, and I have gazed upon this, I've envisioned this, is that in greater dimensions it is so instantaneous that by knowing what you are being, there's no longer a need to do anything, because everything can be done in this being. So it's as if like, it would be as if somebody who's doesn't like themselves, and let's say they connect their in the future there's some sort of cyber technology and they connect their brain to a computer, right? And it's as if, imagine a bunch of people who have connected their brain to the same server. So technically the consciousness, of every individual can move through every body and can move pretty much like if 10 people connected their brain to the same computer, let's say same server, information server, it would be as if like any person, it's like any of those individuals could be any of those individuals. That's the nature of collective mind. You know, some people say telepathy, it's like, buddy, it's like, it's not even something that's consciously known if it is truly telepathy. It is something that's being prior to consciousness be creating a dualistic relationship, or consciousness extracting itself with a sort of prioritization on duality first. There's really 4 ways that stuff can happen. 4 ways to look at everything on this planet. Either it is 0, either it's nothing, either it's 1, it's everything, either it's 2, which is chaos and order, everything's infused in chaos and order, or it's infinite. And what the infinite means, what infinity means victory for a biological organism. Our species, it's hilarious, we are temporary beings, but the kind of it's like our survival is the purpose of our survival is the immortal destiny of the species, and how much it can keep itself as a natural being in the challenges of the unnatural world, right? Like we are like an advanced civilization, and the pilots that are active now in this universal sector, I would say it's as if the task of the great minds of now is to realize that the future generation will have so many problems, and so the greatest thing we can do is strengthen the kingdom of humanity. It's another way of saying that in the honor of the future kings and queens of mankind, which they would all be in some sense everybody, it's like what I'm trying to say is that indirectly we have immortal expectations for the species, but it's like macrocosmically the species is trying to be immortal. Microcosmically we're like, okay, we're mortal, and what's the best thing we can do? We can enjoy the lifetime. And if we enjoy it and find freedom, that freedom will allow us to become responsible for dimensions instantly. The idea is I want to see the whole species. I want to see what a multidimensional advancement of a species would look like. The great multidimensional advancement of humanity, where we cannot fight. It's as if, like, how did wars end on Earth? Human beings realized there were so many ways to look at the same moment. And so with enough patience, an answer has a greater chance of being found. something I'm practicing. If somebody would read like, okay, Mr. Within, what are you like focused on in regards to, let's say, your practice? And what I'm trying to really, the practice is that it's kind of like this, where I am realizing more and more that all the things that I distrusted in, that form my conclusions now, I could have trusted in. And so when trust and distrust are on equal ground, that means it's a choice every moment. Like, I can distrust myself in this moment, or I could trust myself. If I distrust myself in this moment, I'd be like, oh no, I coughed, I gotta end the talking. Like, if I trust myself, I'll be like, okay, the vision, the possibility of what can happen is greater than what has happened. And so to be a being that trusts your inner world and outer world would be in some sense like the wings of humanity in sync, flapping in sync. It's as if we're a species getting ready for outer flight, which is sky cities, and inner flight, which is in some sense realization of the nature of mind being space, where the matter is in. It's pretty much your being a moment of awareness where the body is in and all the ideas you've ever had are in. And so it's kind of like the human being is a simulation inside of a invisible sphere, which is the range of the awareness. Anyways, or I could even say the endless, or the timeless advanced civilization. Later on in other talks I'll explain, and I have explained in some of the previous talks, why the most advanced civilization is inconceivable. It will be. Now it's going to be very conceivable as far as we go, but at some point, if this civilization is advancing or moving faster than the speed of light, it would be invisible to the biological eyes. It's like the mind of civilization is the sum total of all the behaviors of human beings on the planet. And the body of civilization would be, in some sense, it's like, I don't know how to say it, like the mind creates decision. And the question comes, are decisions hollow when there's a universal event going on? I think we're going to make that an episode. But anyways, thanks for listening. And through trust, the future generations will get to see their greatness. Without trust and ability and potential, we can't do anything. And the species has to restore its honor by trusting the greatness of how beyond us they will see. You know? It's hilarious. It's like the imagination is a time machine from the present to the future. But anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode